Hello, I'm Angelina Kelly, and today we are diving into the latest football news and transfer rumours. So joining me to get into all of this is sports broadcaster Ben Jacobs. So Ben, really good to speak to you. At the time of us speaking, Manchester United, they've not yet faced Everton in their Premier League meeting, but the Red Devils have definitely been in the news when it comes to transfers and player futures. First up, Casemiro. We've heard that he could remain at the club, he could leave, his huge salary must be addressed. What is it that you can tell us?
Yeah, I think Casemiro and Harry Maguire are in the same boat where it's actually Manchester United deciding what they want to do. There's a willingness for both players to extend, but Manchester United have to factor in a few things. The cost, which means that both Casemiro and Harry Maguire would have to reduce their salaries in order to get another year at the football club. And I think the other thing running through Manchester United's mind with Casemiro specifically is, one, how many games they're going to get next season. So if they're on course for European football, they might be willing to extend Casemiro by a year and have that squad depth. But of course, two, and maybe more importantly, how many midfielders are going to arrive? Because right now, if you're thinking short-termist, the logical decision is extend Casemiro. He's in favour under Ruben Amorim. But if Manchester United, as we expect, are to add two more midfielders, then Casemiro, regardless of his form this season, could fall down the pecking order. And this is why Manchester United are delaying. So we've heard some reports in the last few weeks that Maguire's talks and Casemiro's talks have kind of hit a stalemate. That's not true to my understanding. Manchester United have been very open and upfront to both players and said they need time to determine what kind of extension, if any, they are going to offer. With Harry Maguire, there's no option to trigger another year, so it'd have to be a new deal on reduced terms. With Casemiro, there is a one-year option, but that would see him on the same terms as now. So the only two scenarios for Casemiro are either he stays an extra year on reduced terms, or he's released because Manchester United are going to do a midfield revamp over the summer. And I think the club just need a bit more time to understand their position before we get to the point of any formal offer for a contract extension for either Casemiro or Harry Maguire.
You mentioned the midfield there and, potentially names that they would bring in. We've spoken about Crystal Palace's Adam Wharton, Brighton's Carlos Baleba, both being linked and both with big price tags of, £100 million, if not more, depending who you speak to. But Brazilian international João Gomes, he's now being mentioned, and the Wolves player would reportedly command a significantly smaller fee of around £44 million, some reports are stating, even if Rob Edwards claims that there's been no official approach.
Yeah, I think João Gomes is a very interesting one to watch, potentially in January, although, as you say, from Rob Edwards' point of view, probably the first thing he said when he took the Wolves job was, don't you dare sell João Gomes or Jürgen Strand-Larsen in the January window. But it's a fascinating position because if Wolves get to January the 1st or the end of the window and they look goners, they may be in a position where they can get a higher number in January compared to going down into the Championship. And then is there potentially a glimmer of hope to a mid-season suitor for getting him earlier than perhaps we would have thought before a ball was kicked this season? And this is why I think that certain suitors will be at least alert to the João Gomes situation. But I also fully expect Rob Edwards to keep saying we're not going to lose any of our best players mid-season. There's no doubt come summer, if Wolves go down, that João Gomes and Jürgen Strand-Larsen are both expected to depart. The number you mentioned, 44 million, I'm told it would be a bit higher mid-season. So we're not necessarily talking about a bargain, but it's whether or not a Premier League suitor might be prepared to overpay a little bit compared to the summer in order to get the player earlier. But it will all depend on Wolves and where they maybe are in the table come January as to whether they're prepared to entertain any offers. João Gomes was a name under consideration for Manchester United a few windows ago, and in fact before Sir Jim Ratcliffe even came in. And he's one of several names on the Manchester United list. It's whether, first of all, Manchester United are going to do something in January or wait to add two midfielders in the summer. And then they'll have to look also at the cost in January compared to the summer, because in January you're dealing with a PSR year. In the summer, especially if you do it after the World Cup, you're moving into the new financial rules where a club like Manchester United, who declared record commercial revenue in their last financial statement, they'll have more rope to work with. So if you think about the cost of a João Gomez or Carlos Baleba or Adam Wharton if he doesn't sign a new Crystal Palace deal, and several of the other targets linked with Manchester United, for example, Elliot Anderson or Angelo Stiller, if you're going to add two of them, it's minimum 100 plus million, and some would say it's closer collectively to 200 million. And for Manchester United to do these kind of deals, we'll have to wait and see whether they think one is worth escalating in January to try and get them over the line for some kind of European football, or if actually they're going to have a quiet January and be patient and add two in the summer. My feeling is that if Manchester United add two midfielders in the summer, I'm not saying they'll get both midfielders, but I think there's other names that are ahead of João Gomez in the pecking order. So in a dream world, Carlos Baleba and Elliot Anderson or Angelo Stiller, and you could possibly throw Adam Wharton into the mix. But if they look at feasibility, and of course they'll face competition for all of these players if they move in the summer, you might find a João Gomez or even a Conor Gallagher are more viable and feasible with clearer paths to get them in January. So it's a fascinating debate for Christopher Vivell and Jason Wilcox to have, because they might be able to get a midfielder in January with less competition, or they may choose to hold out and wait and take a gamble on getting Champions League football and then go big on two other names in the summer.
Yeah, it will be really interesting to see how this turns out. But thinking about the incomings, also thinking about the outgoings with Manchester United, is there an update on Jadon Sancho? Because he's obviously on loan at Aston Villa from United. He came off the bench over the weekend and contributed very little for Villa. Will he just become a free agent at the end of the summer at this rate?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, isn't it? Because Jadon Sancho's transfer value has gone down and down and down, and still at the moment he doesn't have a permanent solution. And I think Aston Villa are a little bit like Harvey Elliott, still undecided what they may want to do come the end of the season. They're paying 80% of his salary. There's no buy option included in the deal. And as a result, Sancho is going to find himself looking for suitors come the end of the season. And as far as I'm aware, there's no guarantee yet. It's too early to tell that Aston Villa will be front of the queue. But of course, from Sancho's point of view, he'll feel that he's a real market opportunity if he does head into next summer without a club. And as we get into that window, I think more suitors will start to come forwards. For example, Milan were one of the clubs that really liked Sancho, but at the point that he was available on the market, they couldn't afford the fee or the wage. Maybe that will change in the summer. The same can be said for Juventus. There's Saudi interest in Jadon Sancho, but he's never given any clear indication that he wants to go there. But a lot can change again in a year, and potentially also after the World Cup as well. So I think it's too early to say where Jadon Sancho will end up. But at the moment, there's nothing to suggest that Aston Villa, once this loan finishes, have made any clear determination that they are going to try and place a bid.
Yeah, now you talk about, Jadon Sancho and his future. I think there was one player switching gears from Manchester United whose future, well, we thought his future was wrapped up, Marc Guehi, when we thought that he was heading off to Liverpool in the summer. That obviously didn't work out, and over the weekend we saw another bad result for Liverpool. The defending champions have now lost 6 of their last 7 league games. I wanted to ask about Marc Guehi and what this could mean, because like we say, he was almost there, and the expectation, especially amongst Liverpool fans that I speak to, is that, he might just join in the summer. But do you think that their poor form could make him look at other suitors? Because there must be other suitors, surely.
Yeah, I think Marc Guehi has a really interesting choice to make, and it's almost the player's decision is going to trump everything else, because all signs were he wanted the Liverpool move, but then after not getting it, the Guehi perspective, to my knowledge, is just keep captaining and playing for Crystal Palace, see out the season, give yourself the best chance of getting a starting World Cup spot, and then take your pick of clubs as a free agent after the World Cup. But in that scenario, there'll be so much interest in Marc Guehi as a free transfer because he's not going to sign a new deal at Crystal Palace. Maybe clubs with need for a centre-back do try and do something mid-season. Palace's position hasn't changed either, that they wouldn't sanction something for a relatively nominal fee mid-season unless they also find a replacement. So it's not clear-cut that Liverpool, because of their form and the defence that we've seen so far, will come in January for Marc Guehi. Of course, it's a possibility, him or another defender, but it's not a given. And the reason it's not a given is because when Giovanni Leone did his ACL, Liverpool sources said very clearly that with Ibrahima Konate, Virgil van Dijk, and of course, Giovanni Leone, and then Joe Gomez as another option, there were 4 elite centre-backs, 3 still fit, plus Leone. So there was going to be no kind of panic buying mid-season. But results and circumstance can obviously change that, as can the fact that Liverpool, as they get clarity over what Ibrahima Konate wants to do, will either determine he's going to stay and maybe they're happy if they're fit with Virgil van Dijk and Ibrahima Konate, or alternatively, like with Trent Alexander-Arnold, they may know quite early he's not going to sign a new deal, in which case you have to start looking for a succession plan. And from Guehi's point of view, was he to move to Liverpool mid-season, he would still have to get that same guarantee, if not an even bigger guarantee mid-season, that he was going to play every week. Because at the beginning of the season, you got more time until the World Cup. But I think the last thing that Guehi will want is to unsettle himself, to move to a club like Liverpool, even if he's keen, to find that Ibrahima Konate and Virgil van Dijk stay ahead of him in the pecking order. And then as we get closer to the World Cup, Levi Colwill in his position for England returns from a long-term injury. Maybe Harry Maguire gets a consistent run of game time. And before you know it, Guehi could be left sweating about getting a starting spot at the 2026 World Cup. So the player will drive a lot of what happens in January. And Liverpool have always been quite hesitant to add another centre-back in January as opposed to waiting until the end of the summer. But their form has hit such a lull that now we'll have to see if they change their mind.
Yeah, it's a very intriguing situation with Liverpool and these centre-backs, and I guess Liverpool in general this season, because I don't think many saw this dip in form coming. But I mean, one team that's definitely benefiting from that is Arsenal. They celebrated a North London derby win at the weekend, and they're being linked to Borussia Dortmund winger Karim Adeyemi. Manchester United are also linked to him too. 23-year-old player. I remember he was the Bundesliga's fastest ever player at one point. I remember reading that stat a few years back. But, for Arsenal, is he the type of player that they would need for Manchester United? He plays in the same formation at Dortmund. But again, is that really where they need to invest?
Well, I think Arsenal might have quite a quiet January. They want 2 key positions. One is a left winger in the long run, but of course it may need Leandro Trossard or Gabriel Martinelli to depart. And let's not forget, Noni Madueke can switch sides and Eberechi Eze can filter out to the left-hand side if needed as well. And the other key area to reinforce is a young striker. And I think that is more likely to happen in the summer, because as Victor Gyökeres comes back, Kai Havertz returns, and then, of course, Mikel Merino can play as number 9 as well. Arsenal, if they've got momentum, which they have, might be prepared to wait. And those are the main attacking reinforcements that I expect Arsenal to do in 2026. But it wouldn't surprise me if nothing really happens in January. Regarding specifically Karim Adeyemi, there's nothing advanced at the moment between either Arsenal or Manchester United and the player. And I think there's some games going on, because at the same time as we're hearing these links of a potential move away, you also have contract renewal talks ongoing as well. And different sources say they're either moving or they're stalling, or that there might be a move away to the Premier League. And I still think at the moment we can't discount a contract extension, and there's nothing yet advanced with clubs that may potentially look at the player over the course of 2026. So it's always one to watch because he's obviously a top player, but there's definitely nothing as developing between either Arsenal and Manchester United, to my knowledge anyway, as some reports have suggested. And I think from Arsenal's point of view, it's probably worth looking at other young profiles, either as wingers or forwards. One is, of course, Kenan Yildiz, who I think there is substance to in terms of the appreciation, but he'll come at a very high price. So it's not necessarily anything to get too excited about yet, but that's definitely a player that Andrea Berta really likes. And the other kind of profile they're looking for through the centre is somebody like Etta Ayong, who's doing really well at Levante. And again, I say kind of profile rather than specifically Etta Ayong, because at this stage it's too early to tie Arsenal to that kind of profile, but they've monitored him, they've scouted him, and that's an indication that probably in summer 2026 they're going to bring in a young number 9 profile who will likely start behind Victor Gyökeres but can challenge him, and that may be a clue to the fact that Gabi Jesus could also leave in summer 2026 as well. So I think if Arsenal's January is quiet, it will be a good thing in many ways because it shows you that their summer recruitment has worked and they're on track for silverware. But come summer, I do expect Arsenal to be in the conversation for a young number 9 and a left winger. And don't be surprised if you hear more over the coming weeks and months about Etta Ayong and Premier League clubs, including potentially Arsenal.
Well, there you have it. That's one name to definitely keep in mind. Ben, thank you so much for joining me. And let us know in the comments what you think about that latest news. Don't forget this video is in association with our own bookie, talkSPORT Bet. Download the app or head to talksportbet.com if you want to get involved. T's and C's apply. 18+, begambleaware.org.